Welcome to episode 231 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. It's June 19, 1960. Asunción, Paraguay. Puerto Sajonia. Olimpia against Peñarol. The second leg of the final of the new South American club tournament. Not yet called the Copa Libertadores. Its official name is the Copa de Campeones de América, the Cup of Champions of America. And today, Peñarol draw 1-1 with Olimpia, and they win the final 3-1 on points. They become the first champions of South America. And like Real Madrid in Europe, they immediately teach a new continental competition what a dynasty can look like. But how did we get here? Start with Peñarol. Peñarol traced their origins to 1891 and the Central Uruguay Railway Cricket Club, founded by workers connected to the British-owned railway in Villa Peñarol, outside Montevideo. The black and yellow colors, the industrial identity, the railway inheritance, all of it matters. By 1960, Peñarol are already one of the great institutions of the Rio de la Plata. They have crowds, they have history, they have domestic power, and they have a rivalry with Nacional that divides Uruguay. They have a squad built for something larger. Luis Maidana in goal, Nestor Goncalves the captain, William Martinez, Carlos Borges, Luis Cubilla, and Alberto Spencer, the Ecuadorian forward, who had only recently arrived in Montevideo and who would become the greatest scorer in Libertadores history. Now Olimpia. Founded in 1902, Olimpia are the oldest major football club in Paraguay, the Decano. They are linked to William Paets, the Dutchman who helped introduce football to the country. They had already built a strong domestic identity, and by the late 1950s, they were in a period of dominance, Paraguayan champions 5 years in a row from 1956 through 60. So the first final gives us something proper, not a novelty. Peñarol, Uruguay's giant, Olimpia, Paraguay's giant. Two old clubs meeting at the birth of something new. But the new tournament itself had a long prehistory. South America had already been thinking internationally for decades. National teams had had the South American Championship from 1916. Clubs from Argentina and Uruguay had played the Copa Aldao, and in 1948 in Santiago, Chile, Vasco da Gama won the South American Championship of Champions, the one-off tournament we covered in episode 134. That 1948 tournament proved the idea. A continental club championship could work. The clubs would come, the crowds would care, and the football would be serious. But the format was too heavy. One city, one stadium, a long round robin, weeks away from home. It was a brilliant rehearsal, but not yet a sustainable annual competition. And that raises an obvious question. If South America was less physically devastated by World War II than Europe, why did Europe get the European Cup running in 1955, while South America waited until 1960? The answer is not lack of football. It is logistics, politics, and structure. South America is vast. Travel was expensive. Domestic calendars were complicated. Some countries didn't yet have neat national champions in the European sense. Brazil, for example, still lived largely through powerful state competitions before the Taça Brasil. And CONMEBOL needed its associations and clubs to agree that this was worth the cost. Then Europe forced the issue. The European Cup began in 1955. Real Madrid made it glamorous immediately. By 1960, Madrid had won 5 in a row. South America didn't need Europe to tell it how good its football was, but the European Cup showed what an annual Champions tournament could do for prestige, money, and mythology. There was Henri Delaunay, the UEFA General Secretary, whose proposal for a regular Europe versus South American Champions match helped sharpen the question. If Europe has a champion, who represents South America? The answer had to be a South American Champions Cup. In 1958, at a CONMEBOL meeting in Rio de Janeiro, the idea took shape. Administrators from across the continent pushed it forward. José Ramos de Freitas of Brazil, figures from Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, Chile, Peru, and beyond. In 1959, at the CONMEBOL Congress in Buenos Aires, the competition was effectively organized, and in 1960, it began. Not with 10 countries now fully committed, only 7 teams entered. Peñarol of Uruguay, Jorge Wilstermann of Bolivia, San Lorenzo of Argentina, Bahia of Brazil, Universidad de Chile, Millonarios of Colombia, and Olimpia of Paraguay. Peru and Venezuela didn't send champions. Ecuador had no national champion to send. So Libertadores began as an experiment, still convincing people. But Peñarol made the experiment look serious from the first night. April 19, 1960. Peñarol 7, Jorge Wilstermann 1. Carlos Borges scored the first goal in the tournament's history. Spencer scored 4. The new competition had its first statement. We discussed all this in episode 170. Peñarol advanced, then faced San Lorenzo in the semi-final. 1-1 in Montevideo, 0-0 in Buenos Aires, so they need a playoff back at the Centenario. Peñarol win 2-1. Olimpia's route is shorter. Because the field has 7 teams, the bracket is uneven. Olimpia beat Millonarios over 2 legs, drawing 0-0 in Bogotá and winning 5-1 in Asunción. And now the final. June 12, first leg, Estadio Centenario, Peñarol against Olimpia. The match is tied until the 79th minute. Alberto Spencer scores. Of course he does. Peñarol win 1-0. 1 week later, today, June 19, second leg in Asunción. Olimpia lead through Hipólito Recalde in the 28th minute. Now the final is alive. The game is volatile. The crowd is close. Olimpia can force the series toward a deciding match. And then, 6 minutes from time, Peñarol find the goal that ends it. Luis Cubilla scores. Olimpia won, Peñarol won. Final whistle. Peñarol are champions. The first champions. The Copa de Campeones de América belongs to Montevideo. So what? Sustainability first. The tournament worked because it found a repeatable structure, home and away ties, national champions, continental prestige, and a prize beyond the trophy. That prize was the Intercontinental Cup. The champion of South America could now face the champion of Europe. That was decisive. Libertadores was not only a continental title, it was a passport to argue with Europe. In 1960, Peñarol faced Real Madrid. They drew 0-0 in Montevideo, then lost 5-1 in Madrid. That hurt, but it also showed the scale of the new world. Real Madrid were the European model. 5 straight European Cups, Di Stefano, Puskás, Gento, Bernabeu. Power, glamour, and ruthless continental identity. So Peñarol didn't retreat. They won South America again in 1961, beating Palmeiras in the final. Then they beat Benfica to become world champions. In 1966, they won the Libertadores again and faced Real Madrid again. This time, Peñarol beat Madrid 2-0 in Montevideo and 2-0 at the Bernabeu. So the arc is beautiful. In 1960, Madrid teaches Peñarol the cost of global ambition. And in 1966, Peñarol returned the lesson. Then there's the dynasty. Peñarol win the first 2 editions, 1960 and 61. They are knocked off their perch by Santos in 62. That's Pelé's Santos, which is about as respectable a conqueror as football can offer. Then Peñarol returned as champions in 66. 3 Libertadores in the first 7 editions. 2 Intercontinental Cups. A team that makes the new competition feel old almost immediately. And around them are names that become Libertadores language. Spencer, Cubilla, Goncalves, Borges, Rocha, Hoya, Mazurkiewicz later. Spencer becomes the competition's all-time leading scorer with 54 goals. Cubilla gives us one of the great historical twists. He scores the goal that denies Olimpia in 1960, then later becomes Olimpia's coach and leads them to Libertadores glory in 1979 and 90. That is Libertadores, a competition where enemies return as architects. And then there's the name. In 1965, the tournament adopts the name Copa Libertadores de América, honoring the liberators of South America. That was not just branding. It gave the competition a mythology. Europe had the European Cup, clean, geographic, institutional. South America chose Libertadores, historic, political, and emotional. And that fits, because Libertadores became more than football administration. It became travel, intimidation, altitude, heat, smoke, rhythm, violence, genius, survival, presidents, barras, penalties, away goals, and finals that felt like border disputes, and nights when a club could become immortal. It also became a showroom. For South American players, Libertadores was proof. European scouts watched, rival clubs watched. Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia, Paraguay, and Chile all watched each other more closely. The tournament helped circulate players, styles, and reputations. Then the dynasties kept coming. Santos, Independiente, Estudiantes, as we covered in episode 197, Boca, River, Nacional, Olimpia, Flamengo, Grêmio, Sao Paulo, and Palmeiras. Where does Libertadores rank today? Financially, it is not the UEFA Champions League. The Champions League lives in a different commercial universe. Broadcast money, prize money, global club brands, and player salaries. But culturally, Libertadores is still one of football's greatest sacred competitions. maybe the only continental club tournament outside Europe that can stand in that same sentence without sounding ridiculous. Not as rich, not as polished, not as globally dominant, but in atmosphere, danger, identity, and historical weight, it remains unique. And that is why June 19, 1960 matters, because Peñarol did not just win a final, they gave South America a new club championship, its new first model of greatness. Before we go, 3 things to take away from June 19, 1960. First, Libertadores didn't appear from nowhere. It grew from decades of South American cross-border football, especially in 1948's Santiago tournament, and from the pressure created by Europe's new Champions Cup. Second, Peñarol were the perfect first champions. Old club, huge support, serious players, continental ambition, and a leadership that understood the tournament's prestige before others fully did. And third, the Copa de Campeones became sustainable because it offered more than a trophy. It offered South American clubs a route to world comparison through the Intercontinental Cup and a mythology of their own through the name Libertadores. On this day in 1960, Peñarol drew 1-1 with Olimpia and Asunción, won the first Copa de Campeones de América, and began the dynasty that gave the Copa Libertadores its first great story. That's all for episode 231 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. And you know my favor. Once you've done listening, and if you haven't done it already, I ask you to please rate the show 5 stars. That will help the algorithm push OTD in front of more people so we can get more on the show. And of course, if you have an idea, my email is otd@17lawsguy.com. Tomorrow, we go to June 20, 1976, Belgrade, the European Championship final, Czechoslovakia against West Germany, penalty shootout, and Antonin Panenka doing something so audacious that his name becomes a verb. See you then.